All right. So, firstly, just for people who've been waiting for 2 minutes, I just want to apologize. I didn't realize there's another button to go live. So you can tell you're live when you don't actually go live. So really quickly, I'm Jason, one of the co-hosts of the Content Marketing Virtual Summit 2021. We've had over 12,000 people register, thousands of people showing up and watching the sessions. We've gotten great feedback, and really that's a credit to the speakers and to the team behind the scene. And today I have with me Elisa Doucette, who's going to introduce herself in just a minute, and we're going to talk about what it means to be a content editor and what she does. So welcome, Elisa, and please introduce yourself and say a little bit about what you do.
Sure. My name is Elisa Doucette. I own an editorial agency called Craft Your Content. And what editorial agency means is basically myself and my team provide proofreading, content editing, and writing coaching for what we like to call professional writers and entrepreneurs. So it's people who are trying to advance their positions, their thought leadership, their recognition among peers, all that kind of stuff through sharing great ideas in writing. And so they come to us not necessarily to write for them or to ghost or to do anything, but more so to, I like to call it, we help people make their own words even better. So we take what is great writing already from these professional writers or the professional content teams that they hire, and we help them kind of polish it up and get it really great.
So that's a pretty nice, sort of encapsulated, description of Craft Your Content and what you're doing. By the way, what are you drinking? I just can't resist asking. It looks really delicious.
It is Twinings Gingerbread Joy Tea.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Yeah. With a very special mug.
I was going to say, out of my business of writing podcast, writing a serious business mug.
Oh, that's good. That's so cool. All right, that's awesome. So Twinings Ginger Tea is what I got. Okay. So so the first question, I think we're going to jump around a little bit, but I think the first question that I'll just jump into here, you kind of answered a little bit, but I'm going to still bring it up so that you can sort of frame it in the context of the question. So here it is. So the first question is, who can hire a content editor?
I mean, pretty much anyone who has an interest in improving their writing and ideas and thoughts with a budget. So obviously, if you want to hire a content editor and you aren't the financial decision maker in your company, then you're going to want to talk to that person to be able to make the hire. Most editors are going to work with the person who cuts the checks to get that contract set up. But really anyone who is working on their writing, they want to improve, they want to share great ideas. If you're someone who knows that you have a lot of really great ideas and a lot of things to say, but maybe you struggle a little bit, writing isn't necessarily your strongest suit, or it's not something that you love doing or felt confident with. We work with a lot of people who, like, that one teacher in high school told them that they were a terrible writer and would never amount to anything. So now they have this fear. And then once we start working with them on their writing, we'll say to them, you actually are a great writer. You have fantastic ideas. You know how to say it. You just need to kind of massage it a little bit and figure out the best way to say it. So really anyone who should work with a content editor if they want to improve their writing or they want to improve the way that they share their thoughts and ideas.
Yeah, and I think too, one of the things you're kind of hinting at is that for any type of project where people are investing a significant amount of time and money, so if they're, for example, if they're going to publish a book of some kind, they're going to do promotion for it, they're going to spend a year on it, and they plan to get it out to a wide audience. That's a significant investment of time and money, and that's where hiring an editor, a content editor, could really, sort of make that whole project flow better and possibly increase the chance of success, in several different dimensions.
It's interesting to mention that. We don't work on manuscripts currently. primarily work on retainers with ongoing writers. We've worked with a ton of authors and manuscripts in the past. And what you say is very true. I always like, it's an interesting position that I'm in as the agency owner, because of course my primary concern in any piece of writing is I want it to be fantastic writing. Like I want to fill the world with just great ideas and great stories and great words. And that is, of course, somehow like in opposition to a lot of marketing strategies that feel that, you know, if they can just figure out the perfect funnel or the perfect button to put on a site or whatever, that's what's going to be the secret. And I'm always kind of not necessarily fighting, but really encouraging people to remember it's a lot easier to market great content and great writing than it is to market something that's subpar or mediocre. Like it can be done, but your chances of getting that following, getting that recognition, going viral are much higher when you have something that's really great to put out.
Yeah, I mean, there's some really interesting things that you're just bringing up. So I'm excited to get into that, because you just in what you said, you sparked a whole bunch of questions and stuff. So I think here's something that I think might be interesting for people, right? Which is, how does someone actually even start? Like, should they go through a lot of work to create a brief? So what is the starting point to hire? Do they have to create the brief before they interact with you, or is it something that you help them to create a brief? Or you have a intake form, or how does that work?
Yeah, the first thing I would say, and for anyone who watches the session that I do with Jay, we actually talk a lot about this, is figuring out what kind of editor you need to work with. So this question is asking about hiring a content editor, but I'm guessing it's more like hiring any sort of editor. And there's really three distinguishable different types of editors. There's a developmental editor that's going to basically be a writing coach. They're going to help you develop your ideas. They'd be the ones who work with you off of a brief to get something written. There's content editors or inline editors. They tend to work kind of more on something you've already written, and then they're helping you to like restructure it, figure out the flow, getting all of the language and ideas clear. So you're not, if you say something up here and then completely contradict yourself down here, content editor is going to say, hey, just FYI, like you completely just owned your own thought process. So maybe you want to fix that. And then there's a proofreader. There's copy editors as well. They kind of live in between content editors and proofreaders. In our agency, we actually use copy editors rather than proofreaders. And they're the ones who they are truly proofreaders and copy editors. God bless all of you, because you are the rock stars. They're the ones who know all those grammar rules, who know the style guides, who know all of that stuff, and will polish your writing so it's as close to perfect as it can get, hopefully while still retaining your voice. And that kind of leads me into what's the starting point for hiring an editor. I'm very passionate about this. This is why I started Craft Your Content, because I find that there are a lot of editors, unfortunately, out there that are very rigid and defined in their ideas of like what proper writing is supposed to be, what perfect prose is supposed to be. I'm in a lot of editorial like forums and different things where people are saying like, oh, well, but if this participle was here, then you would subjugate this clause and blah, blah. And my comment usually is something like, well, if you have to argue it that much, the sentence is probably shit and like should be rewritten totally. Like that's the correct feedback to give. So the first thing I think when you're hiring an editor is, honestly, you want to work with them and see what kind of editing they do. You want to see what their reputation is. You want to see who some of their clients are and the writing they've put out, because you want someone who understands your writing and really isn't going to come in and completely like kill your voice and your vision. And that's, again, why I started Craft Your Content. I was a writer previous to this and had a lot of peers and network that were writers. And that was pretty much the comment and the frustration that people had again and again and again was every time they worked with an editor, the editor just like completely stripped them out of their writing. And that's, I mean, if that's what you're going for, and you do just want your writing to be perfect and, you know, essentially go through like a Grammarly bot, then like just pay $29 a month to get Grammarly Pro and call it a day. If you want someone who's going to really partner with you, work with you, and help you retain your voice and vision, then you really want to talk to a few people. And I mean, it's, you know, like finding any sort of coach that you would use, a business coach, a life coach, a therapist, anything like that. You want to find someone who's a good fit for you.
So I think there's a couple interesting points. The first one is that you brought it out at the end, which is that in a way you're synergistic with your writers, and you're really looking at almost like an orchestra or like a duet, where the writer is sort of creating the medley, and you come in and you kind of weave it together. Maybe you're the drums. I don't know. But,
I'm definitely not cool enough to be the drums.
well, I don't know. You're pretty cool. So the thing is, right? Like the drummer keeps the band on track and sort of makes sure they don't lose the thread of the song. So I'm not, you know, I don't necessarily think that's, you know, that's the best analogy, but the idea being that you're in a partnership, and you're trying to create something that's greater than you know, than its parts, and it's synergistic. And I think one thing you said as well, like the word coach, and also really helping people to feel more seated in their voice, or more sort of owning their voice and not being so timid, you know, is a really interesting you know, concept. So one thing you mentioned earlier as well is sort of what is the I like that. Somebody mentioned a comment that you're the conductor. I think that's really nice.
I was going to say, I think it does end up in that being that it is a conductorship, that like someone comes in with the symphony that they've written, how they see what their music should be. And then an editor or coach or someone will really jump in and help figure out how to get all of the different instruments to play to kind of portray your music as beautifully as possible. I am a prior flautist, so
there you go.
I'm glad that Camille jumped in and noted the conductor thing, because that was exactly where my brain was going from.
Okay, all right. I was thinking orchestra, but I didn't want to go too highbrow, so I went with the drummer. So one thing you mentioned is the different types of editors. So which of those types would you say that your you know, your kind of organization and what you do is closest to?
We cover all three, because I have a very robust editorial team. I have nine editors on staff. So each of them kind of has a different specialty. And generally what tends to happen is you almost like stack them on top of each other. So if you want to work with a developmental editor, the developmental editor, in order to get your piece good, you're not just going to work with a developmental editor, get your ideas developed, and then go and publish. You're going to want to work with the developmental editor to get that draft done. And then you're going to want to kind of work with a content editor to clean up what was written. And then you're going to want to work with a proofreader to make sure that everything is solid and polished and ready to go. So I think it kind of depends on where you are in your writing, where your needs are, and honestly, a lot where your budget is. There's a number of people that I don't think there's anything wrong with it, especially if you're just starting out and kind of building, that start with, you know, we have a ton of clients that have started with us as proofreading clients, or we just one-off edited like a few big pieces for them. And then eventually they kind of come into wanting more of a retainer on some of that other stuff because they're starting to take their writing more seriously. Maybe they're making some money off of the writing because it's so good. Nudge, nudge. And so they now want to work with a content editor to kind of bring themselves to the next level. So really, those are kind of the considerations. If you're really, you know, if you've been writing for 10 years and everything else, it's very possible you just need a content editor, or maybe even just need a copy editor or proofreader. If you're still just kind of starting out, or if writing, again, we were talking like isn't necessarily your forte. Or a lot of times what we'll do developmentally is we'll come into an organization. We work on these more in like 3-month and 6-month packages, but we'll come in and do almost like a content management of sorts for an organization that their content team is kind of scattered all over the place. Where you've got like an owner who has one idea of what they want their messaging to be, a marketing person who has another, a salesperson, and then the actual content team. So we'll come in developmentally to help kind of get everyone on the same page. So you're all using the same language, have the same common voice and vision, have the same foundations to then be able to just kind of scale back to just content editing and proofreading again.
So just to summarize, you sort of mentioned 3 main types of editors, and I'm just going to make it easy to for people to remember that, since it was quite detailed. So we have developmental editors, content editors, and copy editors / proofreaders. And just like the developmental editor is somebody who helps to actually create like an arc, create the flow, make sure that you've got all the elements that make it a great piece. And then the content editor is creating polish, more flow, and helping to to essentially craft it into almost a final document. And then you've got the copy editor, proofreader that's doing the final grammar checking and making sure that all of the sentences are well structured. So this is another kind of related question, which I'm not sure if everybody knows. There's manuscripts and so on. So what kinds of things does your firm, edit? Do you edit annual reports, newsletters, articles, sales pages, books, all of the above, or something else?
Yeah, I mean, for us at Craft Your Content, again, because we have kind of this team of editors, we do work on literally every single one of those documents. Last week alone, we edited a sales page for a client. We edited a pitch deck for a client that's getting ready to go into their round A funding. And so they needed someone to like make sure that their query letters were where they wanted to be. We've done annual reports. We did, 6 clients worth of continuing blog posts and everything else. We pretty much, if it's words, we can help you to get those words to where you want them to be.
I think you mentioned earlier that you're not working with manuscripts, so you're not taking any new manuscript projects, or is that something you just aren't have right now, but you are taking still manuscript projects?
Currently, we aren't taking manuscripts. That might be something we open up to in the future. The only thing with that is because of the way that my agency is structured. We do tend to work kind of on longer term retainer type projects. And for a manuscript to get edited in the way that I'm comfortable putting Craft Your Content's name on it, we really need to devote a lot of time, focus, and person power. So for me, it was basically I've screwed up a bunch of manuscript projects. And so I made the decision last year to just, as much as I like, it's so hard because I love working on books and manuscripts with authors. It's probably one of my favorite editorial projects, which honestly is part of the problem is I do the developmental edits, in all my spare time. So we've really just unfortunately had to step back for now from manuscripts. That might be something we do look at in the future, but right now, I don't think that we are able to deliver what an author needs at the level that I would be comfortable with.
Okay. All right. That's good. So here's one I think that people might be wondering about is that what if they feel shy that their writing isn't good enough?
Again, that's where, first of all, you're going to want to select a editor to work with who is not going to be a jerk. So if you're, for us, we, like you mentioned, it's symbiotic. It's really, we partner with our writers. So if you are someone who's concerned that your writing might not be good enough, that, you're scared to have someone else look at it, working with a really compassionate editor who really does want to help you get better is honestly one of the best things that you can do, because what they're going to do is help you to become more confident in your writing. They're going to help you polish it so that, and a good editor is going to help you understand what you're doing when you're making these changes. You know, they're not just going to go in and track changes and call it a day. Especially if you are someone who is worried that your writing isn't good enough and you're going to an editor because you want to improve it. They're going to really be someone who kind of, encourages you and teaches you and helps you, even if they're not necessarily a developmental editor writing coach. You know, our proofreader, our senior proofreader, Joaquin Roman, he is phenomenal, and he'll go in and make the changes that are necessary, but he'll also explain to people sometimes, if something isn't a very common change, why he's suggesting making that change so that they can learn and improve their writing. And then for our developmental and content editors, we have kind of a rule of thumb internally that we really want to make sure that for every 3 to 5 pieces of critique, I don't even like the word criticism, it's feedback, it's critical feedback, we're also putting in stuff that's positive. If you write a sentence that's really beautiful, I'm going to tell you, like, this is a fantastic sentence, I love the poetry that you used here, or this is literally the thesis of your article. If you are going to share on social, this would be a phenomenal kind of teaser for what the piece is going to be about. Things like that, so that you learn not only what you're doing wrong, but what you're doing right. And that helps you feel better, so that you don't necessarily have to think that your writing isn't good enough, because good enough is such an arbitrary, like, it's a feeling, and I don't want to discount feelings are always important and feelings are valid. But anyone coming in to say that your writing isn't good enough is a jerk. And so
well, that's not the role. That's not really the role that that they're hiring you for, because
exactly.
You're essentially meant to make the combination of the two of you great. And as you, it's like I think the coach analogy is really a good analogy too, right? To have a coach that makes you want to show up for practice, so you don't end up hating the sport.
Yeah.
And what's the point? What's the point of hiring somebody and then you start to dread writing? I mean, that
right.
wouldn't work at all. So here's another question. So does the editor actually change the document, or just make suggestions and then the writer changes the document?
Usually, again, a good content editor or developmental editor, they may track changes. So they'll make changes to the writing, but it's tracked so that you can see what the change is. And both for learning, and also it's your writing. Like, an editor should never replace your words with their own words. That's not the job of an editor. They may make suggestions of, I think what you're trying to say is this, maybe if you rephrased it this way, but they're never going to go in and overwrite your words. An editor won't. If you're hiring a ghostwriter to come in and like polish up your piece to put out, that's exactly what you hire a ghostwriter to do, is to overwrite your words and just fix what you're saying into what they think it should be. An editor is going to make the changes, suggest the changes, and then leave it to you as the writer to decide. They're basically saying, like, as an outside opinion, this part is confusing for me, or I think you should rewrite this way. But at the end of the day, you're the writer. They're your ideas. You should be the person who gets to make that decision, unless, you really are completely terrified that your writing isn't good enough, or quite honestly, you don't care as much.
So essentially,
the
bottom line is that the editor is not going to rewrite it unless it's a ghostwriter. The editor is really there to make, to sort of create some flow, some organization, some connectedness at the developmental phase. But at the copy and at the content editing phase is really just essentially take some things that maybe were said in an unclear way or in an unengaging way, or have some, say, maybe even fluff in there, and be like, let's make it punchier, let's get to the point, let's make it easier to read. And thereby, you serve the reader, right? So that you're not changing the person's words, you're actually just helping to bring out what they already put there. So there's a bunch of different sort of mixed up questions here. So I think this one's a pretty interesting one. So this person asked, if I'm a writer and I want to become an editor, how do I go about doing that? And what should I know before I start?
So the first thing I would say is, if you are a writer who wants to become an editor, one, you want to have you want to read a lot. You need to be someone who is comfortable with reading a ton. I can, on days that I'm working in the editorial queue, if someone's out or something like that, I can literally spend 9 hours straight in documents.
And I think the reason that that's so important, I just want to point out, because when you said that to me, I'm just like, oh yeah, I'm reading my fiction books, I'm reading my history books, I'm reading whatever I like. But actually, that's not true. You're reading the materials that your clients are submitting to you. So when you say that, I just want to clarify, because I don't think that was really clear to me, because I think a lot of people like to read a lot. I like to read a lot, but I'm not sure that it's in a way, it's a different kind of reading. It's almost like, I'm not saying it's the kind of reading we did in when we were in AP English in the US, where you're writing essays and correcting essays and things like that. But there's a layer of like critical thinking that's going on, where you're almost standing in for the reader and saying, is this going to make the reader happy? Is it clear for the reader? So you're not reading it for just fun. You're reading it professionally. And you like to read. So you're, just to rephrase what you're saying, you have to really be someone who enjoys reading a lot and is willing to read in a professional, at a sort of a professional capacity, not just whatever is, whatever kind of stuff you enjoy for fun. Like I like reading Isaac Asimov, but I don't think that I'm not going to sit there. That's not what I'm going to be reading, right? If someone's doing this. So as a writer, one of the first things is they have to develop that professional reading skill, and they have to be willing to do that for several hours at a time. Is kind of what you're saying, right?
Yeah, you actually led perfectly into what is point number 2, is if you like reading, you need to become an editor knowing that you will eventually hate reading, because you don't necessarily, exactly like you're saying, you don't always choose what you're reading. I mean, if you work as primarily just a book editor or something like that, you can choose your manuscripts. You can be very deliberate. But most of the time you're going to be kind of working across different disciplines, and you're going to be editing what people give you, really. And then also there's this really horrible thing that happens when you are an editor. It's kind of like they always say, doctors are the worst parents, because like a doctor knows everything that could go wrong. And so they're much more worried every time their kid coughs. They are WebMD. They know exactly like all of the horrible things that cough could be. When you're an editor and then you try to go and read for fun, it's hard to turn off your editor brain. So you're, reading through these books and having these thoughts of like, oh, they really should have rephrased this sentence this way, or like the flow of this is, so that's kind of 2, is you have to love reading, but you have to be prepared to like read things you don't want to read, and kind of become a comprehensive reader, meaning that you are reading to comprehend and to really process what's happening, which is really number 3. Is if you want to become an editor, I would say the best thing to do is to start just the things that you are reading. Figure out what the pertinent points are. Like, what's the message of this article? Who do you think is the readership? What things do you think the reader may or may not understand? That's really to become a developmental or a content editor. If you're going to become the guru of editors, which is a copy editor or a proofreader, then you really need to take grammar classes, get grammar certification, that sort of thing. Because again, to be a good copy editor or proofreader, you need to be good at that stuff.
Yeah. So I think, like, in summary, the the reader, the question the developmental editor is really asking is, if I'm the reader, what am I getting? How am I feeling? Is it making, is it kind of moving me along? And both for the whole piece, but also for each part. So here's a different sort of couple related questions. Technically, do you use mostly Google Docs? Do you use Scrivener? Do you use something else? What kind of tools do you like to use?
I personally, we are almost exclusively a Google Docs organization, mostly because it is the best that we have found for real-time collaboration. And that means that anytime anyone logs into a document, you are looking at the newest, most live version, which is so important because if you're going back and forth with an editor on making revisions and making changes and all that kind of stuff, you really end up in these bottlenecks when you use something like Word or use something like Scrivener, and that you can't work on a piece until the person changes it and uploads their version.
Yeah, I think there was a related question around, do you guys have a lot of plugins that you use with Google Docs?
I personally, I don't think we use a lot of Google Doc plugins. Again, because we are the AI plugins that you would use for Google Docs a lot. I mean, you could put on Grammarly or Google Doc Pro, I think it's called. There are a bunch of plugins you could get, again, if you just feel like you want to start out using proofreading. But even that, like Hemingway Editor, it's not necessarily a plugin, but it's a proofreading tool that I recommend a lot. But you still have to go in there. Again, you have to, the editor makes the suggestions. You have to be the one who decides if you want to accept that change. Otherwise, they're going to strip you out of your writing, because those are AIs that are trained to just do grammatically what is correct rather than what you want to say.
I see. Okay, that's cool. So it's just really like a pure art, just you guys and the, and the document. One of the questions that I think has come up is just in terms of organizing like different aspects and parts of the content. Are you using anything like mind maps or index cards, or do you do anything like that?
It depends. Sometimes if I am working on a really complicated article or something, I am a pen and paper person, like old school, in large part because it kind of slows me down in my writing to think about what's happening. So I'll just kind of outline and figure out where things should move. When I am doing developmental edits or content edits on something that's bigger, like a manuscript or something, anyone who goes and looks through my Instagram feed from like a couple years ago will see I use Post-it notes on the walls. So I have literally, I will have a 3-foot section of wall just with Post-it notes all over it, kind of breaking out the different sections to figure out where I want to suggest that things should move around to follow that kind of structural flow. If you are the writer, using something like that to organize your own thoughts before you get into the writing, I highly suggest. I love mind maps. I love Trello to kind of organize big ideas and things like that. Anything that helps you kind of brain dump all of your information into one place, so then you can kind of look at everything that you just dumped out of the toy chest and figure out how you're going to put the blocks together. Because
awesome.
otherwise,
So basically your pen and paper, Post-it notes, and sometimes Trello.
I am. I think that some people might be like less Luddite than I am. So I think those other things will work, but I personally like the slowing down when you're trying to think about things.
So this is a kind of a interesting question, which is, how are you able to, I mean, do you work with all different types of subject matter, or how can you edit something that, say, for example, someone's writing for a software or writing for a very specific type of, wellness, like say hormones or hormone supplements or something like that. So how do you bridge the subject matter requirements?
So I generally, if something is extremely subject matter oriented and kind of truth and veracity and fact checking is going to be extremely important, something like wellness products or health or something like that. If you were telling someone how to take different supplements and things like that, I would probably be leery of signing on to a project like that, because we don't necessarily have that subject matter expertise. And I would personally have like a moral conflict advising a writer on how they should edit content that's that involved. On the flip side, software, tech companies are actually the majority of our clients right now. Because we work with so many, the thing that kind of happens in tech and software is the programmer, they know how to speak their language, they know how to create the software, they know how to do that stuff, but they don't necessarily know how to share those ideas with the public. But they have these great ideas, like they made a software product, they're creative, they're very good at this stuff. They just need someone to help them, again, make their own words even better. So if it's something more like that, where we may not necessarily know all the terms right off, but the messaging is still the same. Really, unless you're writing software tech information for other software tech people that like need to know the exact vernacular that way, then I should be able to read your article on software products and understand. Maybe not necessarily, I don't know how to write in Python, so like I didn't, implement everything in this article, but I, as an editor, was able to follow the flow of the thought and actions and everything else so that it made sense to me from beginning to end.
Pretty cool. Yeah, that's great. It's really interesting. I wouldn't have thought of that answer. I'm glad somebody posed that question. We have got one final question, and let me just see which one we're going to go with here. I think this one is going to be a fun one to end the live stream on.
I feel like someone who knows me is in this chat right now.
So who is Max Perkins, and what do you think about Max Perkins?
So Max Perkins, I adore Max Perkins. Max Perkins, he's there's a biography about him called The Editor of Genius. And so what Max Perkins, who he is and what he did, he was an editor at Scrivener and Sons. And he is basically the person who shepherded the entire Lost generation. So F. Scott Fitzgerald, Hemingway, Thomas Wolfe, Dorothy Perkins, all of those kind of 1920s, one of the golden eras of writing. He was the editor for all of their books. He started being the editor for F. Scott Fitzgerald's books, and he did such a good job with F. Scott Fitzgerald's writing and books that more and more of his writing peers came to Max Perkins to ask for help on their books and to ask him to take them on as writing clients. And he has this gorgeous phrase that, of course, now that I'm not like able to be looking at it right off, I will hack it horribly. But it's basically, he says, an editor, it's not an editor's job to replace words with their own. At best, an editor should serve as a handmaiden to a writer. An editor's job is to release the energy of the piece. And that's, I think, that's really what we have based Craft Your Content on, and what I want for all writers out there who work with an editor is to have someone who really does release that energy and help them find the best versions of their writing selves, so that we can have another golden era of writing and literature and thought and everything else. Because, like, dear God, in the world today, we are so due a good golden era of writing and thought and conversation. So yeah, if nothing else, even if you don't come work with Craft Your Content, I'm pretty sure all of you aren't going to, like, find someone who believes in you and believes in your writing and wants to help make you better. Like, that's the type of editor that you should find. You deserve nothing less.
Awesome. So I think like this was a very nice last question to end on.
If someone
And
really knows me, like that is definitely a plant. So
so I think behind you you have the editor's creed, and then you have that little sign that says, well, not little, but it says fight for the things you care about. I think that's what it says.
yeah.
So you can tell a lot about Elisa just by looking behind her. What she reminds
I
herself
also
with.
have a goat in a sweater. So
Yeah, I didn't notice that until you pointed it out, but I think it's good that it made it into the live stream because it's one of those details that
it's important.
it's
As you were
important.
saying, if you're going to know about Elisa.
That's gonna be probably over a cocktail someday. So for everyone who's listening to this live stream, just to say thank you to Elisa for sharing her journey with us and for sharing information about the 3 different types of editors and the idea that you don't have to be afraid to find an editor that's going to be your synergistic partner and help you to to some extent, find what's good, help to unlock the gems and help to connect them. And one thing that was really, really nice and surprising for me is to learn that Elisa works, with a lot of software companies and technology companies, which is really cool. And I hope everyone is enjoying the summit and having a lot of fun and learning a lot. And again, thanks to all the speakers who've been, sharing their thoughts and their journeys. And thanks again, Elisa, for coming on the live stream and sharing your journey and your thoughts.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was great to chat. You all had fantastic questions, so thank you.
All right, everyone. See you tomorrow. That we've got a full lineup of speakers, and you'll be getting all the notifications. And so we'll see you on tomorrow's full schedule for the summit. Take care. See you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye.